Speaker. Been an interesting couple of days. We heard from our president, and that was a great privilege this morning to hear from him at our conference. And we were reminded what an amazing victory President Trump had last November, and that some said it was so very historic, maybe as historic going back clear to Andrew Jackson's victory in 1828. And that took me back, being a lover of history, being convinced over the years as I majored in history in college, because I knew I owed the Army 4 years when I finished that. I figured I'd major what I loved, and that was history. Although my late mother thought I should have majored in math and either been a doctor or a college math professor. But history I loved, and continue to learn from history. The old adage is, who refuse to learn from history are destined to repeat it. The corollary that's not as well known is those who do learn from history will find new ways to screw up. But 1828 election that saw Andrew Jackson become our president actually happened after 4 abysmal years. Some would say the least productive 4 years any president has ever had. And it was actually a president who was a hero of mine, John Quincy Adams. He was the first son of a former president to be president. Some have said he was probably the best educated president we've ever had, having been educated at the best Massachusetts had, England had, France had. He wrote books in German, fluently spoke French, and of course, if he'd had his way, he would have been married to an American. But when his mother Abigail was not too pleased with the girl he thought was the love of his life, he ended up being directed to England, where he ended up falling in love with Louisa, and she ultimately became his wife, but apparently his mother didn't think she was quite fit. But Louisa became the first, used to be able to say, the only first lady the country's ever had who was not born in the United States. Like I say, if he had had his choice, first choice, then his wife would have been born in the United States. But it's the way things fall. He loved his wife dearly and quite accomplished. He kept the most complete journal of anybody we've ever had that was president. And he knew slavery was wrong. He knew slavery was destroying our country, that we could never reach the potential that God had for this country unless we eliminated slavery. He had corresponded to England with a guy named William Wilberforce, who had dedicated his adult life since his 20s to eliminating slavery in the British Isles and British territory. But he ran for president in 1824. No one won with electoral votes. It was thrown to the House of Representatives. And John Quincy Adams garnered the favor of Henry Clay in the House. And when Clay threw his support behind John Quincy Adams, Adams then won the presidency. Adams had some friends that were very close to him. They knew his heart. They knew his heart was pure, and his intentions were clearly nothing but the very best for the United States. They knew him to be a man of honor, a man of integrity, a man of his word. He had not made any kind of deal with Henry Clay to make him Secretary of State. But as a man of honor, a man of integrity, he could not understand why he couldn't go ahead, why he shouldn't go ahead and Henry Clay to be Secretary of State. His closest friend said, "John, if you appoint Henry Clay to be Secretary of State, you will never, ever be able to convince anybody in Congress, the House, or Senate. You'll never convince anybody in Washington but your closest friends, those of us that really love you. You'll never convince the rest of the world or posterity that you had not cut a deal with Henry Clay, that in return for his support, for you being president, you would make him Secretary of State. Please appoint him to anything but not Secretary of State. It's going to look like you made a deal and bought the presidency with the appointment." But there were those who did not love John Quincy Adams, didn't really have that much respect for him, and would have been fine if he had not won the election, but he had won the election. And those that didn't care about John Quincy Adams encouraged him, "Sure, appoint Henry Clay. It's your choice. You appoint whoever you want." Those that loved John said, "John, it's not a good idea. People are going to brand you improperly. We know you're honest. Those are not really your friends that are telling you to just appoint Henry Clay to be Secretary of State. Go ahead." And he didn't listen to the closest friends that loved him and cared about him. He listened to those who didn't care if he succeeded or failed. So he appointed Henry Clay to be Secretary of State. Some historians would say he had the least productive 4 years of any president in history. It's always arguable. But there are clearly times throughout his 4 years as president when he backed bills and pushed bills that would have been good for the United States and that should have had the support of both the House and Senate, when they couldn't get passed simply because people thought he had bought the office with the appointment of Henry Clay to Secretary of State. And so they went against anything and everything that John Quincy Adams tried to support thereafter. And that may seem kind of a strange story to pull out from history, except I was reminded of it as I thought about the day. And I thought about some folks that even in October, they didn't care about Donald Trump getting elected president. They didn't really support him at that point. So they've encouraged him, you go ahead and let's do this bill that we're bringing to the floor, and just never mind the fact that prices will not come down unless you want to say 10% over 3 years, maybe 10%. After the prices will probably continue to go up for those same 3 years. We may be able to cut 10% off at some point. Why? Because we're not stripping the regulation, the regulatory authority out of Obamacare. We're only stealing part of it, and we're leaving almost all of the part that is driven cost through the roof. It's driven the price of health insurance through the roof. It's blown the deductible so high that so many of my constituents and friends know they'll never have enough cash to pay for the deductible to even get to a claim that the insurance company would pay. And I just know that when the prices of health insurance don't come down over the next few years, people are going to say President Trump broke his promise to repeal Obamacare. He only got part of it, but the monopolies that had begun to grow in the health insurance market grew bigger and fatter. And a man who wanted to do an honorable thing for America and get rid of Obamacare, that it cost people their insurance, their doctor, their medicine, that have caused so much suffering and heartache as people struggle with their health care bills. He promised he'd get rid of it. He wanted to deliver on his promise. And he's been told by people that weren't really sure if they cared if he won or lost that, gee, just pass this. This will be great. Just pass anything. Pass. We'll call it a victory and move on. But these are the times when it's very important to take an assessment of those who want to see you succeed and those who really don't care. There are those who have felt that if, on the Republican side, that if Donald Trump was defeated, that would be the end of the Tea Party movement. That would be the end of any type of populism rising up against the runaway socialism, the runaway assault on religious freedom, Second Amendment. American public rose up, and this is our first chance to really deliver on our promises. I hope that the votes are not all there yet, so that we can reach an agreement, so that we can include in the bill that comes to the floor, not an amendment we vote on so that it can be voted down, but actually included in the bill so that we take out at least the big hunk of what has caused health insurance prices to skyrocket. And if we can do that, we can have a win this week, one that we can all feel good about on our side of the aisle. And even my friends on the other side of the aisle, if we do the right thing and make sure that we take action that actually legitimately brings down health insurance costs, then my friends on the other side of the aisle will hear good words, a joyful remarks with gratitude that insurance prices have come down. We can now afford it. Our deductible's lower. We're building a health savings account. It's great. There's some good things that can come out of the votes this week. But if people take advice from those who are not as concerned with their total success, then this could be the start of a presidency that was as unpleasant as John Quincy Adams' presidency, which ended up leading to the inevitable result of his defeat in 1828 to Andrew Jackson. I hope we keep our